And 3, 2, 1. What's up, Joel? How are you doing today, man?
Doing fantastic, man. How's it going?
It's going good, man. It's been I think a year since we first got in touch over Instagram, and we're finally having a real face-to-face virtual conversation.
Real conversation.
Yeah. Grateful to have you on. Yeah, it's pretty exciting for me because this is actually going to be the very first episode of what I'm going to call Barbaric Wisdom, which is going to be this podcast. And I wanted to choose you just because you were one of the very first, if not only people, when I started my project Hellrune, that actually gave me the time of day when I sent them a message, man. Like, yeah, I probably sent maybe 150 messages out to people. And at that time, I didn't have much of a following. And man, right away, first thing you said when I got at you about representing the brand and wearing some of my jewelry back when I was doing the jewelry, and now we're doing the apparel. And you're like, fuck yeah, let's do this. And you're excited about it. And I was just like, man, I got to have this guy on as the first one. Because now I think, like I said, it's been about a year we've been chatting. And, you know, we've been having conversations back and forth just in the DMs and finally getting to talk to you face to face. And just wanted to let people know this kind of relationship that we've built, and here's some of the inspiring things that I've had the pleasure of hearing from you just in our conversations, and maybe shed some light on that for the listeners.
I'm still excited, man, to be connected. It's perpetual, man. It's the energy that we feed off with each other. It's very similar, I always say like minds and like energy attract. And it just builds more powerfully, perpetually from there.
100%. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting too, because I've sort of shifted things now with Hellrune to be a lot more focused around that kind of philosophy with a lot of the writing that I'm doing, and getting this podcast out and showcasing guys like yourself. And, I started with the jewelry, and I'm still doing the apparel, and that's going to be something that I'm going to be developing further. I've got some of the designs in the works, but really what I wanted to showcase was this kind of more philosophical, inspirational approach to solving some of the problems that I think a lot of people are facing, that I've spent quite a bit of time talking about. And a lot of that time talking about that with, like you said, like-minded guys like you. So being able to come on here on the first episode and finally be able to sort of share that in long form versus just these, 5-minute reads on Instagram. I'm very grateful to have you on. So, yeah, man, how are you doing? Like, you recently went through some pretty significant shoulder surgery recently. What did you do to yourself?
It was a little over 3 years ago. We have a tiny muscle that comes out around just north of the collarbone called the supraspinatus, and then another one that comes over from the shoulder blade and connects on the back of the shoulder called the infraspinatus.
Right.
The tendons on there at the shoulder connection were initially almost completely severed.
Jesus Christ.
How
did you do that?
I would say years of wear and tear through, wrestling in high school, and then I got into powerlifting, and then I got into professional wrestling, which led me to finding MMA. And just, I fought for 9.5 years, and just the wear and tear on it, and then doing jiu-jitsu afterwards. Little shoulder pinches now and then, bending it the wrong way, getting it bent the wrong way. And it just caught up with me and popped one night. And
you injured that during training, or were you in a competition, or what was going on?
I was in the middle of a live round during training, and it just pow. And it wasn't anything that the guy I was training with did. I actually didn't have any contact with him at all. I didn't swung my arms around in the middle of mid swing. It just went pow, and I just kind of turtled up. And
man,
yeah,
brutal. So where are you at now? Like, cause it's been pretty crazy kind of watching you document your whole journey. Cause this was I think 4 months ago, 5 months ago, something like that.
July. So was 6 months, beginning of December 8th. And, is talking about, talk about the recovery process and everything. I remember my first visit with my therapist, and he's starting to stretch me out initially, and he's going through his spiel about we may not make progression sometimes, and it's okay. We'll just work with it. And I was like, no, this isn't how this one is going to work.
Listen, doc,
we're gonna do this by leaps and bounds regularly,
right?
and that's the only way. It's how it's going to go. And he just kind of smiled and nodded. And then, as we started to make our way through therapy, it was about a month probably before I got released out of therapy. I had, a lot of people don't know, I had the doctor made me get my carpal tunnel fixed before he would do my shoulder.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah.
Did you end up getting surgery for that as well?
Yeah, I had surgery for my carpal tunnel earlier in the year, and then in July I had it for my shoulder. So pretty,
two for one style.
Yeah, for sure. But the young lady that did my hand therapy for my carpal tunnel was asked my therapist for my shoulder how I was doing. And mind you, this is like a month before we were done, and he's always telling me, "Man, you're ahead of the curve." He turned and looked at her and said, "Man, he's a month ahead of where somebody that would be doing good would be doing." He said most people don't even make it to this area where you're at in therapy because they don't put in that kind of work. They don't approach it mentally the way you approach it mentally.
So what did you do to get your recovery moving so fast? Like, what would you attribute it to? Would you say that, I mean, you talk about your attitude a lot, and I think that has a huge part to do with it. And I've experienced that myself. Like, even with my own recovery, it's kind of ironic. I was just thinking about that when you were mentioning the date that you injured yourself. We basically injured ourselves within 2 weeks of each other.
Oh,
I'm still dealing with a bit of issues with my shoulder. Ended up actually tearing my trap off the AC joint, not a full tear. And then I blew up my back pretty bad, tore some muscles, have a slip disc. I got a CT scan I'm still waiting for, but it was almost within the same month. I didn't know what the extent of my injury was because I was kind of nervous to go to the doctor to actually get the bad news because I knew something was wrong. So I was like, I'll play around with this for a while. And then I was doing okay for a little bit, re-injured myself. And, here I am basically a couple months behind you doing the same thing. I messaged you, I think a couple weeks ago, just asking for advice because I was like, drop the news. It's like, what's up, man? Like, my shoulder's not attached. Yeah. What do I do about this? So what would you tell other people when it comes to getting through a recovery process like that, especially as a competitive athlete? For the average person, it might not break them down as much as it might for someone who's used to being so active all of the time. Your whole life is based around training. It's based around, your training, your sparring, and working with the guys at the gym, and to just be set back like that. What did you do?
The biggest power push was listening to an ebook, David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. I've actually been meaning to send that to you. If you don't have it, remind me and I'll send it to you. I still have it in my audio book library. I listened to what he did and what he went through for what he wanted to do. I was like, okay, now this is bullshit. All I have is a hurt shoulder.
Right.
There isn't any reason why I should be putting this off. And by then I'd already made a date for the surgery, but I actually moved it back 10 days so I could get it done sooner. I was like, I'm going to attack this, and I'm gonna kick its ass. I just started to view it as a challenge instead of a woe is me. And I did that for a little while. And to me, that's a victim mindset, and I hate having that for myself. I think it's terrible. I think it's a weakness within me. I think it's a weakness in general. Don't be a victim. Things happen to people, and immediately, why me? Because life happens. That's why. And now I have a brand new day one. I have to accept where I'm at, and I have to move forward with a plan. This is what I have to do. First, I have to get fixed. I have to go through with the surgery. Then I have to go with my recovery, but I can't get to the top of the ladder without stepping on the first rung. So I just have to start there. And I was excited, man. It was funny because I walked into the surgery room that morning. I was excited. I'm like, hey guys, how's it going?
And like, who's this lunatic walking into my hospital?
And we, they confirm everything. It was really professional. It was funny because I didn't realize they do anesthetic via IV now.
Oh wow!
He was telling me, yeah, they're good. He's telling me it's going to be a little prickly and warm when it goes in. And I noticed when they attached the heart to the nodes on me for monitoring my heart rate, and my vitals, my heart rate was a little up. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of normal. So I'll do some belly breathing to bring it down. I remember right at the top of the first breath, everything shut off. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up in recovery, and I was like, wow, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And, but I had surgery on a Monday. I got my prescriptions, and really funny side note, the person who went with me, we went to the store, because I was a bit hungry afterwards. This is the first time I ever used a scooter in the store. Well, it was because I was a fall hazard,
Right. Yeah.
I was still really loopy. And I remember going by this older lady, and I'm in my immobilizer. And she walked by, she just kind of looked at me and she went, "You poor bastard." And it was so funny to me, and all I could do was laugh, and it still makes me laugh to this day. But got my prescription and everything. And what a lot of people don't know is I had surgery on a Monday, and I got my prescription and everything. And I've never done pills well.
Right.
They monster mash me, man.
What kind of medications did they have you on?
I think
they'll try and fucking just the stuff that they prescribing guys these days is just crazy. Like I went in recently because I had some tooth pain, and they gave me like 30 T3s. I was like, I don't need this shit. It's like,
oh, yeah, big pharma push, huh? But
yeah.
I want to say the amoxicillins, and they didn't make me feel good. I was nauseous, and I had Monday, Wednesday morning, I took it. I was a little late taking it. I was a little paranoid because I had heard how bad the pain is for a shoulder surgery. I had some guys that I trained with down here in Tennessee that said it was just absolutely miserable when the nerve block wore off. And then after I had an episode Wednesday morning when I took my pain pill, I was nauseous. I was sweating in the air conditioning. I was in and out of consciousness, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And I need it. Yeah, and I took another one. I was actually nauseous about thinking about taking the next one that night. Wednesday night, I took my second one for the day, and I got sick, and I was like, I am done with this. I'm going to just deal with the pain. I don't care where the pain level is at. Let's see how bad this is going to really hurt.
Yeah, some of the side effects of those drugs can be worse than the symptoms. It's like,
terrible.
I got some shoulder pain. I'm going to have to suffer through that. But it's like the last thing I want to do is have shoulder pain and feel like I'm going to be throwing up in my bed all day and can't do anything, right?
Yeah. So Wednesday night, I cut it off 2 days after my surgery, and I just mentally prepared myself that this is going to be horrible. On an unprecedented level for me, because what they call them swivel locks, but they're tiny little screws, and I have 5 of them in my shoulder.
Are they still in there?
Yeah, they're still in there.
Man, you're like RoboCop.
They're both. And hopefully I won't have to fly again soon. So
yeah.
But I said this is just going to suck. It's going to hurt. Eat it. And let's see if it can break you. Let's see. I wanted to experience. I wanted to see how much I could take.
Right.
And I got that from the ebook, and I wanted to feel it. And then when my nerve block wore off, and it wasn't anything more than a dull ache, I was like, man, Thursday I was actually dragging limbs around out in the backyard with my coach. We were cleaning up the backyard, and I was like, man, I feel like I should be swinging a kettlebell with one arm right now.
Yeah.
And he just kind of laughed and he was like, just put the brakes on and let's see how it goes. And it never progressed beyond just a dull ache. I had had a cryotherapy cup for the shoulder that I used for the first week and a half to help with the swelling and everything. And I took that back the first time I went to rehab, and I just attacked it. I viewed it as a challenge. I was like, I have to have this. My shoulder has to have more range of motion the next time I go. I pretty much stayed within the parameters of what I was supposed to be doing. I just did more of it. You know, they was like, yeah, do this once a day. And in my mind, I was like, this is bullshit. I'm doing it twice a day.
Right.
That way I'm going to make this better because I need to do this better. I got to do it better for me. And I have to lead by, if I'm ever going to lead by example, I have to lead by example for myself right now and cut to the bullshit and do the work and just do it.
Yeah, man, that's inspiring. I think that is one of those hardest things. One of the hardest things with recovering from an injury like that too is knowing how much to push. Because a guy like you is gonna push. You know, a guy like me is gonna push, and at least with me, anyways, that's been probably the biggest challenge is not getting carried away or getting too excited on my good days, because there are good days and there are bad days, and on my good days usually come right before my bad day after I've done something stupid.
Definitely.
You know? So it's interesting to kind of hear how you found that balance of pushing but also not furthering the injury or delaying the healing process.
I didn't want to completely step over the line, but I kind of wanted to wave my toe over it, you know, without throwing myself into recklessness. Remember, I was laying on my back and I had my arm pulled up and I was stretching with my left arm over my head. I thought, man, it would be really great if I could stretch both arms over my head at the same time. And I wasn't supposed to be doing it yet. And I was like, I just want to see if I can. And it took me forever. It was shaking. It was wobbly. But I got it over my head, and I felt like Rocky at the top of the steps in the movie. Man, it was so great. I was like, this is phenomenal. And then I did it like a week later, sitting in my truck because it was pouring outside. And I didn't want to get out of my truck yet to go in the house. And I was like, man, let me see if I can do it and just raise it over my head. So just a few little things to push the envelope. Hey, let's maybe see if I can do this today because it feels pretty good. And just push it, you know, be right on the edge of the envelope without being reckless about it.
Right.
And just embracing the enthusiasm with it. A lot of people are caught up in, man, it's going to hurt. Yeah, it's going to fucking hurt. You know, eat it because life hurts sometimes.
That's right.
So you have to be, if I'm not prepared to help myself physically to get back to where I know I need to be, how am I going to deal with life when something bad happens? And I had a problem. And I had an issue with that before, and I had a bad perpetual life cycle that I was living, a childhood trauma that I was living that I recognized later on. And we can talk about that here in a little bit if you want to. But, man, just attack it and be enthusiastic for facing it and diving into that well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's interesting too, because like, you know, you're talking about Goggins, and there's other guys like that online, like Jocko, and even, you know, Joe Rogan, man. and even yourself now with some of the stuff that you've been putting out. It's just it's fuel for people who can't just pull that out of themselves. It takes somebody like yourself who can dig down and pull that out of themselves to really show everybody else that that's possible. And you know, it was one thing that you said to me that sort of shifted my mindset, which was pretty significant, was when we were chatting in the direct messenger on Instagram, and you know, like, you need to have a new day one. And that stuck with me ever since, because it was just like, you know, when you're at the top of your game, and you know, when I got injured a couple months ago, I've never been stronger. I hit 3 PRs in 1 week, and that week,
nice.
Everything just sort of fell apart, right? And so it's like, you got to forget about everything that happened before. You got to forget about how strong you are. You got to forget about how mobile you are. You got to forget about how many hours a day you were able to train, and find a new goal. And I think that's what helped me. And it sounds like what helped you, where you made your recovery, your new goal, your new fight that you were training for. And that was the same thing that's kind of helped me. And that was 100% because of what you said. And, so for me, what it became was, okay, so how can I perfect squatting just the bar? And every single day, even if it's just the bar, that movement, I was going to work until I have it absolutely 100% right. Or when it came to, like you were saying, like with the shoulder mobility, just being able to raise your arms over your head, like, that's the new victory. That's the new PR, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
It's kind of just that fighter sort of trainer mentality. And, I feel bad for people maybe that are going through things in life and they haven't kind of grown up with that tendency to seek resistance or seek challenge or seek discomfort. And I think that's one thing that people who've been enveloped in sports and athletics and things like that is, at least for me, it's made it much easier to deal with the challenges of life outside of my training. So for me, it's like when you go, like it's not comfortable to go and train for 2.5 hours and then spend the next 3 days, barely being able to get up off the toilet by yourself.
Yeah, my first thought was, why is the toilet so low now?
Yeah. That's not comfortable. But when you learn to participate in voluntary suffering over and over and over again, putting yourself through discomfort, putting yourself through pain, getting underneath a heavy bar, or like you stepping up against another opponent and knowing there's a good chance this guy could probably kill you or choke you out or put you in an arm bar and tear your shoulder off or dislocate something, and you're voluntarily putting yourself in that position. So for somebody like you who's being faced with this challenge of having to go through a new pain period, for somebody that doesn't have that sort of instinct to race towards a new challenge like that's going to be uncomfortable, they're going to have a really hard time dealing with the greater challenges in their life. And that's when you end up with people who, they end up having a really hard time. They end up feeling like a failure in life, or like they're not going anywhere, or when shit hits the fan, they crumble. They can't handle that. So yeah, like how much of that would you attribute, I guess, to your career in martial arts?
I would attribute a lot to it. And your opponent, before I dive into that, your opponent can vary in context. Whether, after I got hurt, it was my shoulder was my opponent. My pain tolerance was my opponent. How many more degrees of flexion and range of motion am I going to get within the next week is my opponent. How much pain can I take to make sure that I'm progressing is my opponent. But I wanted to do that because, I talk a lot about sacrifice and struggle and rolling up the sleeves and getting into this grudge and slime and slogging through the mud of training. And I like that gritty stuff and the sacrifice of it, but it doesn't sacrifice who I am as a person. It fulfills me and it makes me more powerful of a person. It instills more powerful energy because I know I just made it through something really, really tough. And then
absolutely. Yeah, sorry. And all I was going to say was, all I was going to say was just to add a little bit to that was I think the importance of doing things that are difficult and facing these kinds of challenges. You kind of hit the nail on the head. And to me, that's something I've learned kind of through my own process of not just injury, but issues with my health problems. Again, some traumatic experiences that I had a few years ago, which kind of sent me for a loop and then I had to recover back from. but you come out of this thing, as long as you've continued to keep stepping forward and taking on the challenge. You might have setbacks. You might have days where you're just like, fuck this, I'm not doing this anymore. But, 6 hours later, you pick your ass up and you stop crying about it. And, that exercising of your own willpower
Definitely
builds up positive momentum, just the way that negativity will create negative momentum, which sends people into these down spirals.
Yeah, for sure. There was a mantra that I used starting probably maybe 3, 4, 5 years into my MMA career, and that was dare to be great. I would repeat that to myself. I remember, probably say the first time consciously that I remember doing it. I was down in Georgia for a really big fight. They had kickboxing on the card. They had regular boxing on the card and mixed MMA on the card. And I had a high profile opponent, and it was a chance to go out and dare to be great. But then I was way out experienced. I was a blue belt, and that guy was a murderer. But you never know in a situation like that. A lot of people live in fear of what they could be possibly capable of. And the dividing line between certain people is either I'm going to step over this line and see what can happen, possibly, or I can stay on this side of the line and stay comfortable. And, you had talked about, moving forward, like with my mixed martial arts career, I'm doing some writing myself. I got a book I'm planning on putting out in the future. And one of the pages talk about violence was always around. My
Mm-hmm.
uncles were wrestlers. My uncles were wrestlers. And even before any memory, I've seen pictures of me with adult size boxing gloves on, and they look absurdly huge on my 3-year-old body. But I'm boxing with my uncles in the front room, and even as a child, man, my uncles were gangsters, man. They would box each other in a front yard over a half sliding word and have a go at each other, man. But so it was something that I was always around, playing like ditches or something, hide and go, in a middle school version of hide and go seek. And then we would always tackle each other and wrestle each other, at 10 o'clock at night in the alley or in somebody else's yard. A buddy of mine, him and I are still friends. We went to middle school together and we graduated together. I don't know how it ever got started, but one night it was only me and him. We were in his backyard, and all of a sudden we were squared off, and we just started wrestling. And it wasn't a super regular thing, but it was semi-regular. And I don't know how it ever got started. One night we were just wrestling out in the grass, and it was like 11 o'clock at night. We're out wrestling in the backyard. And I had friends like that. And then I started wrestling in high school. And then I got into, after we wanted to talk about the prison thing, but after that, my brother was doing professional wrestling.
Right.
And I really wasn't hip to it, because I was like, man, this is just like bullshit. I'm really not into it. And then he finally talked me into it. I went down and hung out with him, and finally climbed in the ring, and it was a little fun, and actually started getting going. And we transferred from the original promotion that we started with to a promotion out of Indianapolis, and finally got around some guys who had some real experience with it. And the transfer was important because I got to be friends with the owner's son. And one night he was like, hey man, we don't have an event next week, but we're renting out the ring. Like, we're going to go set up the ring. You got to hang out all night. We get in for free. What we're going to do, he goes, we're setting up these rings for these guys that do these fights. He's like, man, you got to see it. It's crazy. I'm like, okay, man, I'll check it out. And this is like the year 2000. So it was still super underground. It wasn't super big yet. I showed up one night. We set up the ring, watching as soon as everything got started and the fight started. I was like, holy shit! People really do this. This is amazing. And I
Yeah.
talked to a guy that night that I'm still friends with to this day. Some months later, I bumped into a guy that had fought in one of the local towns in Indiana. That night, I got a phone number from him, and 3 weeks later, I showed up, and last month was my 18-year anniversary.
Wow.
So yeah, once I started, it was like, this is what I do now, and there's no exceptions around it. And I was 4 or 5 days a week.
Yeah, because you weren't always a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy. Because you started in wrestling and then you moved into MMA and you fought in MMA for a while. So just to give some people some context that might not know who you are, they don't know your background. Why don't you just tell us a bit about your fight career and how you ended up becoming a BJJ champion?
I started on a local circuit down in Indianapolis. I was a standout wrestler in high school. And then I found a guy whose name's Tristan, and I started training in Kokomo, Indiana. Trained for 6 months, took my first fight. From there, probably standouts, Dan Severn used to run a promotion called Danger Zone. And at the time, they wouldn't allow mixed martial arts in Michigan, where he's from. So he would bring his promotion down into Indiana. So I went up and fought for him a few times, tournament style, a couple fights in a night, which is interesting and fun.
Couple MMA fights in a night?
Yes.
Man, that's intense.
Two tournament fashion. Yeah, a lot of strategy. You got to make sure you go out and try and annihilate the first guy, so you're not as hurt.
Yeah, you don't want to get knocked out in the first fight and have 3 more fights to go.
So fought for Dan a couple times. I blazed a quick path, man. I was 10-0 going into a light heavyweight championship fight. My first pro title fight was for one of the local kind of regional promotions, and took my first loss. And it was up and down after that. Especially when you have success like that out of the gate, sometimes you tend to think you're a little bit better than what you are.
Yeah, you're invincible until you're not.
Yeah, man. Until you meet a real fighter. And I remember during the middle of that fight, he was in his guard, and man, I pasted this dude right on the end of the nose, man. And all I did was go. And I was like, shit. Now I made him mad.
Now he's pissed off.
Yeah, now I'm fighting him, and he's mad at me. But it was up and down after that. Couple wins, take a loss, another win, take a couple losses, and it was just back and forth. And then a few high-profile fights, and just ended it. I eventually had 33 total fights. Had a title, couple local titles on one of the regional events here in Indiana, or up in Indiana, called Coliseum Combat. I was their 155 champion, and then eventually the 145-pound champion, and was the welterweight champion for another promotion down in Richmond, Virginia, called Excalibur Extreme Fighting Championships. I was a pretty high-to-do show. Had a couple high-profile guys on, and after I took a loss, it was fight number 33. I did absolutely everything perfect in camp. And it just wasn't enough.
Right.
So I was like, I was kind of bitter for a little while about it. I didn't agree with the stoppage, but that's one of the things you got to kind of cut the cord on and say it is what it is. And I dove. I was a blue belt at the time, and I put on my gi and dove into jiu-jitsu. I got my purple belt shortly after that. And I was excited, man, because purple belt's like a first real big belt. And I was excited to go out and compete. And the first 4 tournaments at purple belt, I won 1 match. Yeah, these experienced guys, man, I'm getting all this little lame stuff, and I'm like, man, what the hell am I doing wrong? And my coach pulled me off to the side, and he's like, hey, man, check this out. We're going to do this training camp every Sunday. We're going to do an hour of wrestling live, and we're going to do an hour of jiu-jitsu live. It's no technique. Coming in, we're doing our rounds. You get tapped, start again. If you tap them, start again. It's just how it is. we're going to do this every Sunday. I did that every Sunday for about 8 weeks, and it completely changed. Everybody in the room leveled up dramatically. There's a tournament in New York City that the camp is specifically for. It's a no-gi tournament, the no-gi pans, that are held in New York City every fall, once a year. Yeah, the gi version in the spring out on the West Coast. Then they have the no-gi version of the pans out on the East Coast in the fall.
Right. Is there any I guess notable variances in the rules for gi versus no gi?
In a gi, there's only one. I can't stick my hands inside my opponent's cuffs on the sleeve or on the pants. But other than that, I can take his jacket out and wrap around his neck and choke him if I want. I can use and manipulate techniques with the uniform. With no gi, I have a compression shirt on and shorts, and I can't grab the material. I have legs, arms, and neck to attack.
With that, yeah, because that seems like it would almost, not maybe not entirely, but it seems almost to me like from an outsider is a completely different sport, because you could probably be excellent in no-gi, but if you don't know how to manipulate the gi versus somebody who is a master at manipulating the gi, that could be the difference between a win and a loss for someone who's an excellent opponent.
Definitely. It's funny you say that. I went to New York and I won my division. It was my first international title. This was a purple belt. I wasn't able to go back for 2 more years until 2013. I won my weight class and the open. And at the time, I didn't know that it's the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation is what I primarily compete for. I didn't know that they kept statistics like your rank and your weight has specific amount of points, and they'll rank you. And right after I won in New York, I was number 3 in the world in my division, in my weight class.
Wow.
My very first thought was, how do I get to be number 1? And I needed to get to California and go to the no-gi worlds, and establish that. Had somebody who bought a package of 20 private lessons, wrote me a check for $1,000, and I had my trip paid for.
That's unreal.
I went out and won my first. I won my weight division and the open class both. I won 2 world championships basically in one day, purple belt. Got my brown belt after that. I had a big upswing. My brown belt, I was on a tear. I won almost everything I entered at brown belt. I went to what's called the Masters Worlds, and it's the gi version for us guys that are 30 years old and older. So we don't have to mix it up with these 20-somethings. And I'm telling you, it's rough.
Yeah, but you're fighting the guys who have all the experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? They've been around the block.
The first time I went to an IBJJF tournament as a black belt, it was in Chicago, and especially here in the Midwest, a lot of us know each other. And one of the guys I know, another black belt, is like, "Hey man, you want to meet your opponent?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure," because I'm all about respect and doing that. So I walk over. This dude's got 4 stripes on his black belt, and in my head I was like, "God damn it!" And so I talked to him, very cordial, and then we cut it off because I want to keep my mindset. And I immediately start looking for my coach. He's up in the stands. So I said, "I need you to come down here." And he just kind of looks at me. I'm like, "Come here." He gets down there and I pulled him close. He's like, "Man, this dude's got like 30 fucking stripes on his belt."
He's a murderer.
and he started laughing. And this is, my coach is younger than me, but you talk about mentors. Man, I love this dude so much. And he's been phenomenal, not just for my jiu-jitsu growth, but mindset also. He looked at me and said, "You're a black belt. He's a black belt." I went, okay. And then we went out and I ended up losing 2-0.
Yeah. I mean, once you're at that kind of like elite level, it is kind of interesting. Like, you might start to doubt yourself in that type of situation, but it's like, you still did the fucking work to get your black belt.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Right? It's like you're on that level, right?
It's funny. Like now him and I have had like 3 matches.
Oh yeah.
First match he won. The first time he won by 2 points. The second time he won by an advantage, which is like he has a very good guard. He was an old school Carson Gracie guy, born and raised in Rio de Janeiro. Very old school, extremely good basics, very good guard. And that's the one thing that I've been having trouble with him is he'll pull guard. And once you're in his guard, man, it's a fucking fight. And he almost swept me. You know, to get like an advantage, you have like what's called advantages. If you and I are training together, and you're in my guard, I'm playing bottom position, and I bump you over and I come up, but in order to get my points, tournament style, I have to hold my position for 3 seconds. So, but if you bump me and come back up on top before the 3-second count, I almost swept you. So it's an advantage. But basically what they use them for is tiebreakers. Like if it's 2-2 and you have 2 advantages and I had 1 advantage, your match.
Right.
So you came a little bit closer to some stuff, you know, close submissions. You know, if you slap a triangle on me and I got to fight my ass up to get out of it, boom, I come up for fresh air, man, you're getting an advantage automatically because you almost had it. Like,
right.
you almost had it, but not quite. But we're going to give you a little bit of credit for it. So our second match, he won on an advantage. And then in our last match that we had, he won on a referee's decision.
Oh.
Meaning, 0-0, no advantages. So cutting it, you know, ever so slightly, eliminating my mistakes. Because basically at black belt, that's kind of what you got to do. Is looking to make your opponent make a mistake so you can capitalize.
So the interesting thing about, or at least the thing that has kind of interested me about jiu-jitsu versus, I guess, the MMA world is you know, with the MMA world, a lot of it is marketing, but it does kind of come across as like, you know, people will paint it as this very toxic, violent, sort of dumb guy, punch drunk, sort of just, you know, it's just we've got these murderers in the ring and they're just killing each other, and you know, it I think it can distract people from, and maybe give the wrong message sometimes, mostly with how it's marketed, with some of the philosophies of martial arts. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu seems like one of the last martial arts that's still protected. You know, it still seems very, you know, I guess the traditions of martial arts and the sort of the aspects of discipline and respect and you know, for your master and things like that, and seems like it's still very pure. It hasn't had all of these other outside influences, at least from my perspective, come and change the dynamics of like the traditions of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Jiu-Jitsu. And I was just kind of wondering, like, from your perspective, someone that's spent so many years competing in Jiu-Jitsu and training, what are some of the sort of, I guess, an insider's view of the discipline and the sort of maybe even the spiritual aspect and sort of personal development that goes along with participating in a martial art that still demands those traditions of, you know, respect, discipline, honor, those kind of things?
To start, I will say the MMA crowd is definitively different from the jiu-jitsu crowd. Some, not all, because I'm not going to encapsulate the whole MMA community, but there's still some of those guys in there that are your meatheads, man. You're always going to have a jerk in the sport somewhere. Typically, fighting is very personal, especially unarmed combat. Especially guys that are training, almost everybody thinks that they're going to be a champion because that's the kind of mindset that you have to have. But not everybody, it doesn't always apply when you go out. It doesn't always apply practically. some guys, you either have the guys that get it or the guys that don't. Those are the defining differences between the champions and the guys that are still on the local level after 15 fights. You're always going to have the knuckleheads, but with me, the better I got, the more it made me realize that you never know who you never know. First, you never know who's trained, especially after more exposure. Some of the most non-intimidating guys and that I've ever met were absolute killers. A guy from Northwest Indiana, my coach, James Klingerman. You would never guess that dude is a murderer.
Yeah, it's almost like the guys that don't feel the need to showboat. Those are always my favorite fighters. Like at least when I was a lot more interested in MMA in some of the earlier years, like my favorite fighters were always the guys that would just walk out there straight faced. You've got the showboaters who are just talking shit, doing the rah shit, and then they get their head kicked off.
Yeah.
And the guy goes back and shakes his hand. And, like, I got a lot of respect for guys that can go out there and do that, knowing their level of skill.
Plus with, my prior run-in with the law, I had a guy when I was going to work down here a couple years ago. He cut me off. I went to go around him and he sped up, so I couldn't go around him. So I punched it, went all the way around. He cut back in front of me and then he threw his coffee on my car. Just because I wanted to be in the left lane and not go 72 miles an hour.
Right.
And it, no matter how it ended up, if we would have ended up face to face, realistically, it all ends up bad. Either I gunsmoke this dude and I beat him half to death, or he's trained and I don't know it and he kicks the shit out of me, or he has a gun and I get popped.
Right.
And all three of those, just those three scenarios, it's all bad, because then it comes back. If I kick this dude's ass, then he can find, eventually he finds out who I am, and there's legal ramifications.
Yeah, there's never any end to the retaliation, right? As soon as it starts, it doesn't stop. And just to put some context to this, because I think it's a good time to dive into this, is a few months back, you put out a video testimonial, kind of just laying all your shit on the table. And, I thought this was pretty inspiring. You put some of the darker aspects of your past on the table and kind of just dove into it. And this video that you posted ended up getting, hundreds of shares, thousands of views. It was all over Facebook. I ended up watching it again this morning. And, to see where you are now and what fighting has done for your life and what you've done for your life with discipline and some of the other principles that you've kind of learned along the way to attack life and not let setbacks define you. Why don't we get into how you ended up getting into prison? And I think it starts with this scenario that you're talking about right now. You spent a bit of time in jail.
Yeah, man. I saw a group of guys, man. They were popular. I saw them in the clubs. I knew they got a lot of girls, so I just put myself in a position to get to know them. Like I talked about earlier, violence was always around. So, a brawl in a club, a fight in a club wasn't anything for us to get into with guys from other towns or something like that. But when it started building perpetually more, and I started putting myself in worse and worse positions with people that I was around, it grows in a fantastic avalanche way. It compounds super fast. And, I ended up, was going to an after party, and with an acquaintance and two guys that said they were my friends, my boys.
Yeah.
And the acquaintance pulled a knife out for some reason, and I just happened to catch it out of the corner of my eye. We were cutting through this gate, and into
He
this
pulled a
yard.
knife on
He
you?
pulled it. He had a knife in his hand, and
Right.
I didn't know that he had it out.
You don't know what this guy's going to do with it. He's acting weird.
So at that moment, it was, he was going to stab me, or I was going to flatten him. And I just, as soon as he came around, cut the guy, I just hit him. It's the only person I ever walk off knocked out. And, even all through the MMA stuff. And my buddy.
Well, I mean, it's life or death in that situation, right? It's like, you're not going to let this guy stab you over, having to talk to the police. Like, you're going to defend yourself. You don't know what they're going to do, right? They might, that's like with any person,
definitely.
Someone comes at you in the alley, they might not have bad intentions, but you don't know what their intentions are.
He had it out, so I wasn't going to take a chance. My buddies got upset with him and tap danced on his head a little bit. I was like, hey, that's not what we're here for, man. Let's get out of here. After I had turned my back, one of them took his wallet. I did take the knife out of his hand. That was my second mistake. The first mistake was putting myself in that scenario in the first place. And the second mistake was taking the knife. And then one of them, I don't know which one, and I probably will never know. One of them took his wallet. I didn't find out about that till about 3 blocks later. I immediately took it from him and pitched it into the river. A week later, I got arrested for strong arm robbery. When I went and got arraigned, it was a Class A felony in Indiana. It carried 20 to 50 years. It
Wow.
was, robbery resulting in serious bodily injury. So I was sitting in the county jail.
Basically for being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, man.
The whole wallet situation basically put you there.
Yep.
Otherwise, you would have been defending yourself.
I went to my pre-trial. They offered me to lower it down to a Class B felony, 10 years, do 5 if I behave. I told them no because I didn't rob the guy. And about a week and a half later, I have 2 legal packets that show up. Both of my boys made statements to the police, turned state's evidence, said I did everything.
Oh my God.
I was kind of sunk at that point. So I made a decision. I called my lawyer and asked him if I could still take the plea agreement. He said yes. Then I called my mom first thing, and I asked her if she was sitting down. And she said, yeah, why? And I was like, I'm going to prison. And
wow.
Just kind of cried.
What did that feel like? What did it feel like to have to call your mom and tell her that? And what was it like to know that you were going there knowing that you didn't commit a crime? That's like everybody's worst nightmare. You watch all of these shows about, these different trials and these murder trials and stuff like that. And even, what happens in certain states with the death penalty and things like that. And you're wondering, a little piece of you is wondering is like, man, but what if the guy didn't do it?
Yeah.
You're one of those guys that just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
No, and I didn't know it then, but that was now my brand new day one for me then.
Right.
So
you've been doing this day one fucking shit for a while now.
I remember real quick, man. I used to say to my friend, I'm the king at starting over.
Right.
And I dislike the term now because I don't want to have to start over with anything that's within my control now. But yeah, man, I just had to eat it. And once I got there, I knew I had to do something because I was told they had a college program through Indiana State University. You could get an associate's degree. And the big thing with that is it knocked a year off, which is 6 months of real time off your sentence. I was like, right. Man, I'm all about that. Let's do that. But what I didn't realize is the profound effect that would hit me in my second semester. I was doing an exercise for a philosophy class. I initially didn't like the class, but it quickly became one of my favorite classes. I was sitting in the day room. I had backed myself into the corner, and I put my headphones on, you know, the old AM FM radio, the only one you can get on commissary. And and I just started writing. And I remember stopped because my hand, you know, my hand was on fire. I was writing really good that day. And I stopped and I looked across the day room and started watching everybody. And then all of a sudden, man, my belly flopped really, really hard. And it was like, I only can describe it now as an energy shift, but I felt like I got pushed physically because my whole body moved. And I had this, you know, I tingled afterwards, and I was like, man, I had to be really fucked up to get myself in here with all these guys.
This is like, if there was any moment where someone could identify a wake up call, it was like a full body wake up call. You're like, how the fuck did I wake up here?
Yeah, and from then on, I decided I didn't care what anybody said to me. They could call me whatever they wanted, as long as nobody touched me or tried to manhandle me. Then I don't give a fuck. I'm going home. And I've doubled down on the books in my classes. They didn't have a summer program, so during the summer, I would transfer. I would get a job in the kitchen and go and eat as much as I could, because at that point I had my job in the kitchen, which only lasted till like noon, and then I would go back to the dorm for the rest of the day. So then I went out and lifted with the guys I was lifting with at the time, we had a phenomenal system, man, and I got really strong there for a while. And
tell me about the prison yard workouts, the diet, like what did training in jail look like? And you were saying before, when we were talking previously together, about how, you know, some of the numbers you're pulling in prison with especially for your size and stuff like that, you know, with just basically all you were doing was training, reading, eating, sleeping.
Yeah, pretty much during the summer. I remember I said I was going to eat 5,000 calories a day this summer. And man, if you've never tried to eat 5,000 calories a day for an extended period of time, you have absolutely no clue how hard that is. It's amazingly hard, because you're halfway through the fourth meal, and it's like, man, I got to eat 2 more meals, and I don't want to eat anymore now.
Yeah, I don't know how some of those the pro bodybuilders do it. You know, I was trying that for a while when I was taking bodybuilding more seriously, and you know, just the dieting and the food and the eating was probably the hardest part for me. And so then I was like, well, I'm getting more interested in powerlifting anyway, you know, and this lets me eat whatever I want.
Definitely.
So
definitely. Actually, we had a pretty unique system. We ran 3 days on, 1 day off, in a two cycle system. The whole 7 days was 1 cycle. At the beginning of each 3 day, 1 day was dedicated to the chest. On the beginning of week 1 of one of the 3 days was flat bench, and on the other end, after the first day off, was incline bench only. So we dedicated each one, and then we threw back, and then of course squats and deadlifts in there too, and and we ran a system. If your set was next, if you weren't laying on a bench, but your set was next, you didn't change any weights. As soon as you got up, you went to one end, and we all just rotated around. We had a very fine-tuned system.
So you'd hope you didn't have the 300-pound dude lifting before you, because you're going to be picking up off the rock whatever he just put down.
But we did have a 300-pound guy, and he was one of the strongest guys I ever met at the time. In a pair of blue jeans, shitty knee wraps, one of those, you know, the wide back and it tapers down to the thin in the front weight belt.
I like the retired, you know, those the dads you see at the gym that are retired, and you know, they've probably blown their back out, so they can't really squat anymore, but they still have gigantic arms and huge fucking back.
Man, exactly. And this was him at 6 foot tall. Mike weighed 330 pounds.
Oh my God.
He had a pot belly, don't get me wrong, but he was enormous. He was so wide, and he was dim. I remember I had talked to him on the walk a couple of times, because he was all about somebody that was strength related.
Right.
And as soon as I got into the kitchen dorm, we hooked up. I went up to see him one night. I heard somebody just screaming at the top of their lungs. Rah! What he's doing is working himself into a frenzy.
Right.
And I get up on stage and I see all this weight. I start counting. This dude had 855 on the bar.
Holy crap.
And he squatted it comp legal.
Wow.
It was important to him that he had depth. He's like, I don't give a shit how much weight I do. I just want it to be right. But he did this.
He would fare pretty well in USA powerlifting.
And yeah, man. And but it started from there, and it was all about strength training until I came home, and then I found wrestling,
Right.
pro wrestling, and then my brother got me hooked up on that. But yeah, man, I ate everything that I could. I tried to keep my protein way up and just throw my carbs on top of it. Now I wasn't discriminate on what I ate as long as I was getting my protein intake.
Right. So, you spent this time, you spent your time training, you found sort of a way to find something positive to focus on. You're involved in, getting your education and your training and things like that. So by the time you finally got out, how did you readjust to normal life, and what were some of the things you did to kind of get your life back on track and where you are now? Because for a lot of guys that end up in prison, all it does is make them better criminals. Some young kid might go in there at 18, 19, 20, and he might not even be a bad guy. It might be somebody like you who got wrapped up with the wrong people, or he made a stupid mistake, or he was drinking and got himself into some trouble, and otherwise he probably would have been okay and done pretty well. But then they go to prison, and you see a lot of these guys come out and they're just fucked up, and they end up on this new path to being career criminals because they don't get the rehabilitation that they should be getting when they go to a place like this. That should be the goal, as far as I'm concerned. You want people to come out being better people, reintroducing them into society so they can be contributing members of society. But it doesn't seem like that's what we're doing.
A lot of it boils down to the rehab programs are actually pretty decent, but you have to want it for yourself. A lot of the guys will just come in and play the system. And eventually that goes back to their mindset because they're still stuck perpetually in a life cycle. Sometimes you get a guy like me, it was his first offense, man, and then he gets it, and then he has that life moment, and then he makes a conscious choice to do what he has to do to get out and go back into society. And a lot of guys don't care. The return rate when I left was 85%. Wow. 85%. Yeah, that's astounding. And a lot of guys, man, that are better off in prison because they have a roof over their head and they're eating regularly. Right. They get to exercise. They get to hang out with my guys. I don't have girls here, but it's an easy way to shirk almost all responsibility in the real world.
Yeah, you almost climatize to it, where maybe it starts out as feeling like things get taken away, but then that becomes your life, that becomes your routine, and these guys almost fall into it, and they don't know how to live a real life of purpose, because it's like the dog on the chain. The dog learns how long its chain is, and doesn't go beyond the chain.
Yep, absolutely. And I remember a couple of younger guys, man. One of them, I remember he only had a 7-year sentence. This dude was 18 years old, but he was living like he was never going to leave. That's the way he was acting. I've seen a couple of instances where him and some of his boys would jump on some people, and it was ridiculous. And I'm like, I asked him. I remember they jumped on this older cat, him and his buddy, and the dude looked at me and said something to me like I was supposed to help him. And what it came down to is this dude owed them some money and he didn't want to pay him. So they went and kicked his ass. But he was like, man, but I do this, I'm not going to have him disrespect me because I don't know if I'm ever going to leave. So I'm not going to ever live with disrespect here. And the fact
Right.
that he thought he would never leave was more profound than what he did.
Well,
It was
that
this
that mindset
mindset.
is what was keeping him there.
Yeah, man.
He was
Like
almost creating his future reality by just expecting nothing more for himself. It's like, I'm
I agree.
here, and go into that woe is me mentality, and you start to feel
Yes,
like a loser, and so you start to act like a loser. Eventually you become a loser.
definitely. It's all in your mindset. You create your reality. I look at where I'm at now in my life, and I was like, man, I created this shit because I put in the work to get where I am at now. I had to work my ass off, and man, I had to go through some really bad suffering. Um, I went back to Indiana for a while. I had some issues with my girl. I remember us having a lengthy conversation about that. When I had moved, and really, what that came down to is that was quite a bit of that was my fault because it was my mindset where I was at the time, and I didn't realize I was doing a lot of the things I was doing, and it all goes back to your thoughts, man, and because your thoughts lead to your decisions, lead to your actions every single time.
I feel like a lot of people just live their life on autopilot. They don't think about this stuff, right? You obviously got into a place where, you know, maybe it was prison for you, or maybe it was another situation in your life that might have set you the wrong course. But as soon as you become aware, it's hard not to catch yourself. You might fuck up here and there, but it's hard not to catch yourself and get you back on track. Once you drink the Kool-Aid, once you sort of get on this
Yeah,
path
yeah, man.
to self-improvement, it's very addictive. Just like it's addictive and progressive to be negative all the time. And you see so many people struggle with consistency, staying motivated, discipline. And, they might get to a really good place for a while, and something will happen. Something will throw them for a loop, and, they're right back in that negative place. So what I wanted to ask you was, what are some of the things that you do outside of martial arts to kind of maintain that state of mind? Like, do you meditate? Both you and I have talked about our passion for nature, the great outdoors, getting outside, just spending time being alone with yourself. And, I know you spoke about it. You said you wanted to talk about it a little bit on here, was some experimentation with psychedelic substances like mushrooms, kind of exploring your consciousness more, which I think is an interesting thing that's starting to crop up in a lot of the scientific communities, because they're actually finding that a lot of people who are like these people who are just on this are always in a place of starting over, like you said. They're always in a depressed state. They're experiencing anxiety all of the time. They don't have a lot of meaning in
Yeah.
their life. They don't have a sense of purpose, but they're lacking the ability to look at themselves. So maybe with this sort of idea of getting alone with ourselves, whether it be just spending time out in nature or kind of diving into your subconscious using substances like this, what was your experience with that, and how did that maybe give you greater insight into some of the things that you were doing that made you question what direction you were in your life in those moments
Um.
of, like, did that challenge you at all? Did it force you to challenge
Yeah.
yourself or look at yourself in some sort of profound way?
Yeah. Definitely. As far as like a problem, like right now, when I see something that's hard and it's starting to kick my ass, I'm like, man, fuck that. I reman back up, and I catch it pretty regularly now, and I try to stay, like say, I try to stay conscious of what I'm doing, and paying attention and being present with what I'm doing, giving myself presence with what I'm doing, whether it's walking or just something as simple as opening a door. Um, and as far as like the psychedelics, originally it was just when I first found them, I was in my wild and stage, and it was for kicks. I didn't realize that it's actually medicine. Um, now diving into, like, I do a lot of self-reflection. We talk regularly about meditation and getting outdoors. When strength and conditioning doesn't cut it, and my jiu-jitsu doesn't cut it, I know I have to go out into the woods. Um, I was so disconnected from a lot of things when I was younger. Uh, but the one thing I always enjoyed was being out in the woods and camping out and stuff like that. And it's even more profound now. Because if anything over and above and all I believe in right now is energy. And I believe there's so much phenomenal energy that comes from the woods, which comes from the mother, the earth. And it's very healing and very therapeutic for me. Does a lot of self-reflection. The harder part of that is that a lot of times, a lot of people, I think why they get stuck in the cycles that they get stuck in is they don't want to look at the ugly that they have.
Right.
Because I'm doing great, and on the inside, man, their anxiety is high, or their paranoia is high, or their depression is almost killing them. That I mean, you look at some of, like, only say this because it's so prevalent when it happens. Some of the celebrities,
Right.
that like Robin Williams, man, that dude was one of the funniest dudes on probably the planet ever. But he was so depressed. He was, but he was trying to make other people happy because of his own perpetual sadness.
Or Chris
And I think,
Cornell, even, like, one of my favorite singers of all time. Guy has everything, peak of his career. You wouldn't think they have any reason to kill themselves, but
yeah,
there's
man.
just something that's going on inside of these people where they can't just take control of it, or they aren't able to look at it. It's too painful to look at it.
And that's where, after going back to Indiana and doing a lot of really soul searching, that's where the psychedelics come in, especially the psilocybin. And I believe, and even with the ayahuasca ceremonies that are getting more and more popular now, I follow, probably 3 or 4 ayahuasca retreat pages on Facebook. It forces you to go face to face with those demons that you have. They always, those guys are always there. I won't say they're always there, but if you don't deal with them, they'll always be there. And there's only so many times you can push them down before they come out. And mine came out perpetually in tears. There was a time earlier this summer where I started crying, and it turned into days that I was crying, and then it turned into weeks, and then into months. And there's only so many times you can plot your own demise before you ultimately pull the trigger or don't. And I had a couple some very real spiritual, very real energetic moments that helped me out through my reading and self-reflection, and of course diving into the psychedelics, because they force you to deal with the demons that are there. Once you've eaten them and swallowed it down or drank it down, you don't have a choice at that time. You're now going to buckle up, and you're in for the ride. And so, having the strength to maintain through the ride. The last time that I took some medicine, man, I remember I had to take a shower because I was looking out into the woods, and I always see ghouls and goblins and demons, and it doesn't matter if I'm looking out into the woods. It's in the trees, in the bark, in the way the leaves are formed in the tree, in the dirt. And I was like, man, fuck this. So I closed my eyes, and then, fuck, I can't close my eyes because now they're in my head, floating around. It's even closer. It's like, fuck, I'm trying to get away from it. But the more you fight it, the stronger it is.
Right.
It comes back hard unless you just completely deal with it. And I was like, I'm going to go take a shower. I went in, I took a shower, and I leveled out, did some conscious breathing. I use the water as a metaphor as a cleansing, not just physically, but energetically and spiritually also, to wash it off, wash it away. And man, I was in a scalding hot shower for probably 25 minutes. Yeah, my skin was red when I got out. But it was so fulfilling, and I felt so much better. But what I realized I didn't do is I didn't turn on the fan for the exhaust, and I closed the bathroom door. And when I got out, I remember I was drying off my back, and I looked up and I looked at the mirror, and it just breathed like a set of lungs. And all of a sudden, and then all the demons, all the faces started showing back up.
Right.
And then my heart starts to race. It's like, fuck, now they're in the room with me. But at that moment, I decided to stay. I was like, no, you're going to watch this. You're going to stand here. You're going to watch it. And you're going to fucking deal with it. If you can do all the shit that you've done physically, through mixed martial arts, through jiu-jitsu, through all my strength and conditioning, if you can do that shit, if you're mentally strong enough to deal with that, you're mentally strong enough to deal with this.
Right.
And I made myself stand there and watch all this terribly scary stuff, man, swirl through. And as it slowly faded, man, I just envisioned all this slowly fading out of me. And it was a really big purge. Shortly after that, I did my testimony that we talked about. And then, man, I went through my period of a big depression. I had realized the childhood trauma. I had realized, I had gotten rid of a lot of things through that last journey into myself that I had let go of, and it was so overwhelming. It was a trigger, and I just started crying because I didn't realize about the childhood trauma until part of the way through this, and then some of my reading. One of my favorite books ever, because when I realized what had happened, was a book called "Stop Doing That Shit."
Right.
Yeah, have you read it?
Straightforward. No, I haven't. But you were telling me a little bit about this book.
And it's a fantastic book. It's a follow-up book. The first book is Unfuck Yourself.
Oh yes, I think I'm familiar with that title. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And then the second one is Stop Doing That Shit, and it talks about 3 life saboteurs: your ultimate view on life, or your ultimate view of yourself, your ultimate view of people in general, and then your ultimate view of life. And man, I started looking and thinking of why I was doing it, and it was like a flash picture show in my head of everything that I had ever left in my life: cars, jobs, girlfriends, wives, certain people that were friends. There was stuff that I had absolutely abandoned, and it was because I felt like I had been abandoned at a point in my life when I was in middle school. And I had talked about the person with this. I'll go ahead and share it. It was my dad. And I felt like he had abandoned me at a point where I really needed him. And what I did is I realized that I had encapsulated that, and I lived that trauma, and I turned it into my life. I would abandon shit first so that it wouldn't hurt me. And it was a very powerful thing, man, for me to realize. And actually had a really long talk, and a very good talk with my dad. We would talk about psychedelics, man. My dad, he doesn't remember now. He did copious amounts of acid when he was younger. But he's now a double stroke survivor, which has disconnected even more shit in his head and reconnected some different stuff in a different way. He's one of the smartest people that I know. He's also on his own scale. I love him to death. He's just an extremely different human being. And we had a very compassionate talk. I went and talked to him, and I told him, I'm not doing this to hurt your feelings, man. I'm doing this so I can tell you that I forgive you, so I can tell you that I love you, and that it was okay. I get it, and I forgive you for that. And it's been so powerful to be able to do that, because it was like a weight lifted off my shoulder. At times now I feel like I'm overly empathetic or I'm overly sensitive, because now I feel so much, because I've connected to so much now because of realizing something that was so powerful in my life and being able to release that. I've never had the mindset in the relationship that I've had now, and it's so special to me. It means everything to me to be able to have that. And a lot of times I get so emotional about shit, just a random stupid commercial, and I'll drop a tear out, or some, or, it sounds ridiculous, but it'll be, some kids movie, some special moment that triggers an emotion that I had before, man, and I'll drop a couple of tears, and I'm like, damn it, I'm not supposed to be dropping tears and stuff like that. But I'm glad that I can be able to do that, because I'm of being so connected and not being able to feel before that. Now I've dealt with a lot of demons, a lot of the problem, before, I failed to mention this, even though it was in the back of my mind, through this whole thing with, in the club phase where I was, getting into a lot of brawls and stuff, which led me going to prison. I had met a young woman, and we had a child together, a daughter, Michaela. Next month will be her, Jesus, it'll be 2000, and it'll be her 27th birthday. It would have been her 27th birthday. She died at 4.5 months old.
Yeah, you had mentioned that in your testimony.
Yeah, man. And that was, when you stop caring about yourself, you don't give a fuck about anybody else. And that's a cold, hard fact, man. And I had to come to realize that myself. And I gave up. I abandoned the idea of having any more kids, because that was my trauma, my abandonment. And I key on that a lot. I abandoned the idea of ever having kids again. I even went so far as getting fixed. And now, that's, if I have one life regret, I don't regret anything in my life. I don't regret going to prison, because it gave me something of immense value. I had my very first real life moment when I was in prison, and I value that above a lot of things in my life. But if I had one life regret, and that's not having the courage to have another child.
Right.
And now that's the one thing that drives me, man. I babies fucking love me, man. They do. If a baby's crying locally, they give the baby to me, because they call me the baby whisperer down here. It's funny, but I believe that's it. I believe that's the change in the energy shift. I'm all about giving up good energy, because when you have something powerful to give, and you're conscious of that, you're giving something good out, it comes out in energy. I remember, like, I'm sure you can relate to this, walking into a room, like in a restaurant or something, and there'll be a certain amount of guys that will turn around and look at you.
Oh, yeah. I was always the dude. Every time I'd go to the bar, I couldn't figure out what the fuck was wrong with me. But I was always the one rubbing shoulders with people, get bumped on the way to the bathroom. And, couldn't figure out what it was, but it's obviously something I was putting off.
It's your energy, brother.
Exactly. Yeah. It's exactly what you're talking about, where, you start to attract these things, and you're kind of doing it subconsciously, but you're walking around with a chip on your shoulder all the fucking time. People are going to pick up on that. If you're kind of a bigger looking fit dude, it's like, you're a perfect person for somebody to test how tough they are in that kind of situation. But what it ultimately kind of seems to come down to, this message that you're kind of sharing, is in order for these people who can't seem to move forward in life, what you've done over and over and over and over again, whether it has to do with confronting your father, or confronting the reality of being in prison, and the fact that you put yourself there, and then even confronting your demons through psychedelic exploration, and kind of having to look at all these dark things, all of that was voluntary. All that comes back to is this voluntary suffering. Yep. You can connect it to the training, choosing to get punched in the face, choosing to potentially get choked out, choosing to destroy your back or rip your shoulders out of the socket, trying to pull 500 pounds off of the ground. It's all voluntary, and it all kind of self-improvement, whether it's physical or whether it's emotional or any kind of progress that you want to make in your life from a negative place to a good place is going to take a certain amount of putting yourself in front of these challenges and facing the things that you don't want to face. Everybody wants it easy.
Definitely.
Everybody wants to just coast through and have someone put life on a silver platter for them. But the fact is this shit is always going to happen. You know, maybe you're doing good right now. Something's going to happen a year from now or 6 months from now, or, you know, somebody's going to die. People are going to die. That's just going to happen to you in your life. Your parents are going to be probably the first ones to go, and nobody knows how to deal with that. Nobody knows how to deal with the loss of a parent. Nobody knows how to deal with the loss of a child. And so, you know, but kind of reverting back to the mantra from this Goggins book that you started with is you know, you've kind of taken on that mindset of, you can't hurt me. Whatever life throws at me, I'm going to confront it. I'm going to beat it. That's my new opponent.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
What I'm getting is you've been doing this. You've been doing this in basically every aspect of your life, and a lot of people don't understand that, and that's why I think it's so powerful for them to hear it coming from you. Is, you know, you've done extraordinary things, but you're still just a regular guy. The difference is that you chose to voluntarily put yourself in a position to suffer for the greater good of your personal development.
Yeah, man. And it you know, one of my speaking coaches in my group, we have this back and forth thing. Like when we talk about struggling and sacrifice, I don't believe that struggling and the sacrifice takes away from who I am. I believe it enhances who I am. It's part of my makeup, man. I love that. You know, that it to me, it should. There are certain aspects that have to be hard because they're worth so much more on the other side.
That's what makes things meaningful, I think, is doing things that are difficult and practicing the willpower to overcome things that are difficult. And, you know, this was something we were mentioning, you know, previously, but a trend that I kind of see in society nowadays, and why a lot of men are suffering and a lot of men are not doing very well. They're not doing very much with their lives, and they're not being useful partners. They're not being useful sons. They're not being contributing members of society, because society isn't really asking very much of men anymore. In some ways, they've kind of been told that their role shouldn't exist. You know, that they're toxic or this and that, all the buzzwords that kind of get thrown around. So, you know, how do you think that we can continue to meet men's needs in some ways that simulate the things that drive us, that society no longer asks of us, pardon me. You know, like, what are some of the things that are going to make us feel useful? Because to me, you know, this purpose-driven life is surrounded by doing things that are difficult, and that's what makes life meaningful. So how can men kind of maintain their worth in society? Is it simulating, you know, some of these more primal ideas, like through martial arts and exercise and training, or climbing a mountain, or building something, you know, starting a family? What was it for you?
No, first, you know, there's a lot of, you know, I love the philosophies of strength through brotherhood and being a man, being physically prepared, being mentally prepared, spiritually prepared. But what we don't talk about, and you have mentioned it, why some guys are down, is what we sometimes don't talk about in the aspect of guys are supposed to be tough, is that, man, sometimes, man, we need brothers to lean on. We need to talk about what's going on in our head. We have to have that guy, that brother that, man, if it's hitting me that hard, I need that shoulder to lean on, man, and get it out. Somebody, you know, that way it goes back to dealing with it. And some guys put themselves in their own position that they shouldn't talk about it. And I'm a man, I just have to That's just the way it is. No, it's not just the way. You don't have to live like that. You don't have to live in perpetual blah of you know, like I having a fucking case of the Mondays. That's
It is kind of that
bullshit.
victim mentality that you're talking about,
Yeah,
right? You know,
man.
it's kind of like it's almost like people have grown to admire apathy. You know, almost like it's cool to not give a fuck, but it's not cool to not give a fuck.
Oh
It
man, you
just
got to
means you're a
care.
loser, right? If you don't give a fuck about anything, that means that your life is meaningless. You're not going anywhere.
You know, this dude at work, man, and his one of the most prevalent things that comes out of his mouth is, "This sucks. This sucks." And I was building this big flatbed for a truck with him, and at one point I stopped and I go, "No, man, it sucks for you." And he just kind of looked at me like, well, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And I was like, "It's all in a mindset."
Why aren't
I
you
was like,
empathizing with my sort of
"Yeah."
shitty worldview right now?
You know, and I was like, "You view that, man, this sucks. Like, look, man, I know we got a lot of work to do, but why don't you just attack it, man? It's all in your mindset. It doesn't suck for me because I understand this is what I need to do. I'm choosing to be here. If it's that bad, man, why are you still here? Man,
Yeah,
you're right."
you've got a job to do, right? And that's kind of like, I feel like you can take that approach to everything in life, and obviously you have, where you know you're gonna get these shitty situations, or maybe you hate your fucking job and you don't feel good about it, but that's still a decision that you're making. You know,
You're still
you can
showing up
take it
every
as,
day
oh,
to
it's
do the
cold
job you
out.
hate.
Exactly. Well, you know, like you're a tradesman, right?
Yeah,
You know, you're fucking
a
working
welder.
outside, any weather, it's freezing cold, lifting heavy shit. A lot of people don't want to do that. But when you approach it with the mindset of, this is the job I have to do, I'm going to get fulfillment out of doing my job well, taking pride and ownership over this thing that I'm going to produce, and that's going to represent the effort that I put in, and then you can feel proud of yourself. But guys don't seem
Put
to
that way.
understand this concept that they're gaining from attacking the things that they don't necessarily want to do by honoring themselves
Yeah, absolutely.
and doing a good job.
You know, as far as like what we need to keep doing, there's always going to be, you're always going to need the knuckle draggers for the front line when somebody comes knocking at your door that you don't want at your door. Whether that's on a national scale or even in your house, man. I if somebody said, if I hear the boys say, "Hey, man, there's some guy at the door," man, I'm up and on my feet. You know, my chest is already puffed up. You know,
Yeah,
I
you're
don't know
answering the
what's going
call,
on.
right? That's
Yeah,
the responsibility that you've volunteered for. You volunteered the responsibility to be the one to answer the call.
yeah, man. And
And
most of
that's
the
what
time,
makes you feel purposeful, right? That's what gives you
yeah,
your
man.
job to do, right? It feels good to have a job to do and know that you can fulfill the role.
And most of the time, man, it is non-threatening. But had the situation arise, I know what I'm there for, and that's not a bad thing. Um, I fucking hate politics, but I think there's a lot of agenda that, you know, the guys that are in the gym banging it out, or the guys who, especially like mixed martial arts, man, I loved the period of mixed martial arts that I was involved in, because the UFC wasn't what it is now in 2001, 2002 when I first got started. You know, it was a different kind of mentality, man. We just showed up. I never had a thought about trying to get to the UFC. It wasn't about that. It was about, man, I get to go fight somebody. This is, you know, what I didn't realize, that was an out for me. Um, I could go lift weights, but you know, lifting weights only goes so far. If I go and I put it out on the line and I go and I have a fist fight with somebody under whatever rule set, that's a different kind of expression. That's a different kind of release, um, that I didn't have before, and probably why I got in trouble, because then I was fighting in the clubs.
Right.
I wasn't doing it in the correct manner, and now I had a way that I had an outlet that I could be a knuckle dragger. I could be that guy and still be okay. But I had to find that right area. Oh, I found these guys. Boom. And like we talked about, man, this like minds attract. And I've been in that circle for almost 20 years now. It's
Yeah.
been an amazing, amazing out
Yeah,
for
it's kind
me.
of like you needed this cathartic release of violence to almost kind of keep yourself on the level and express yourself in a way where that wasn't going to manifest in a negative way. And it's almost, it's interesting because, you get a lot of this talk about, the kind of toxicity of these groups and these men that are fighting and, behaving aggressively and things like that. But ultimately what it is about is cooperation. Even the guy that you're going to go and beat the shit out of, you've both chosen to operate under the same set of rules with a referee with competing against another man who's agreed to the same rules, and both of you will either accept defeat or victory under those rules. To me, that's not toxicity, that's cooperation, and that's a really positive thing, because ultimately, like you said, if that's what a particular kind of man needs, if he doesn't have a place to do that in a controlled environment, he's going to end up being one of those guys who is like your buddy that you were talking about in prison, who doesn't see a way out.
Oh man,
right?
And I know, I still use the example, you have somebody cut you off in traffic, or like I had somebody threw their fucking drink on my car while going down the interstate. Maybe it was a person at work, or as some people say, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, which is bullshit, because it's your attitude, how you approach the day. But and some things, life happens and things happen, and it can put you in a funk, and there's nothing better, and it makes you want to, I can't choke them, but now I get to go to class and go train, and I get to go choke somebody. you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
So now I get to go do that in my space. I get to go do that. I get that release. And then on the way home, I'm good to go now.
And then you can go and be productive. You don't have all of this pent up energy and negativity and, fuck face at work's been shitting all over your day. And then you got to carry that around with you. You can go and you put it somewhere and then go and get the shit done that you need to do, be the partner to your lady, or, be a mentor to somebody, or a father figure to somebody. Or even like you were saying, a brother. Like a lot of what I've started to experience, especially with this, whole sort of new development of social media and how I've changed the way I've been using it, man, meeting guys like you, meeting other guys online that are just genuinely looking for camaraderie from other positive, like-minded dudes who are just trying to do better, and then collaborating and sharing how they can do better, or giving encouragement when they're getting knocked down with injuries, or, sharing advice on maybe how to write a book or things like that. Those are the kind of conversations I'm having with this people. And a lot of dudes just don't have that surrounding them. But just for any of the men that are kind of out there that are listening to this, is you can do that. It just takes you to put in a little bit of effort to connect with the kind of people that you want to surround yourself with. I see what Joel's doing. Maybe that's not what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to look at what he's doing that is working for him. Or maybe I want to be more like him, or I want to get involved in jiu-jitsu, or I want to have the kind of conversations that he's having and that he's speaking about. Maybe I want to be able to get to a place where I can share that. And, the only thing that I can say to those dudes out there that are struggling to find a group of men that they can belong to is to start paying attention and figure out what is valuable to the guys out there that are more like what you want to be like, and then start to orient yourself in a way that would be valuable to that group of people.
I've heard the quote before, man. Once you find your why, a how is so fucking easy. Because once you got it, and it's in your heart, it's in your energy, it's in your gut, that's in your head, man. And that's all you can think about. How you're going to do it is easier because now you have purpose. I say I've been saying regularly for years that motivation and inspiration are part bullshit because they come and go like the tide. Motivation, man, I'm so motivated today, and then a week later, man,
Yeah, you take a look at that fucking bag of Doritos and you're back on the couch and you're sleeping in until
Definitely,
11
man.
o'clock.
But when you're moved with purpose, when you're moved with a passion, that's true power. Because now you have something that you're fighting for, something that you're training for. Whether it's just that release or in the camaraderie, or you have specific goals in mind that you wanted to do. I never said before earlier in my jiu-jitsu career, man, I want to be a 6-time world champion in jiu-jitsu, and I want to have several MMA titles. I never said that. It was just the results were part of the work that I put in and went out, and it was just about going out and doing it, putting in the work and just doing it.
Well, I think that's kind of what people lose sight of is they see this massive undertaking of whatever it is that they want to accomplish, and it just seems too big, too large to ever get to a place where they could say that they're a world champion, right? It looks like just such a massive accomplishment for somebody that is maybe sitting in their basement playing video games all day. They want to do better, but they look at that and they're like, I can't fucking do that. But what you just said was it's this accumulation of doing the next task over and over and over and over again. You don't have to tackle it all at once. All you have to do is figure out what the next thing is, what the next small challenge is, and attack that and accomplish that. And okay, well, I did this. That wasn't so hard. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And then all of a sudden, you're a fucking world champion, or you own a business, or you've got a massive following of people that are, clinging to every word of what you have to say, or you've created something, or maybe you put a record out and now you got a record deal. And everything that I've been able to at least accomplish in my life has never been some sort of superior ability or intelligence or even skill set. It's just the accumulation of doing each one of these little tasks and working towards them and attacking them and tackling them until I complete them, and just repeating that over and over and over and over again. People think they're going to have a career by, that a career is just something that you get by, being somehow greater in your field than another person, and then you'd get this thing. It's like this idea of holding onto this career like it's something that you can collect, but really it's the career is just what you get at the end when you've done all the work already.
Right? Man, and you have to continue the work when you get there, or you won't stay there. Exactly. Consistency. So
yeah, man, again, I appreciate you having you on, and I wanted to know, like, what's next for the baby silverback? What's on the schedule for you with your rehab, and are you going to be competing in the near future at all?
Yeah, real quick, a lot of people don't know this. I got that nickname. I was lifting weights for the guy out on the yard. He was a former drill instructor for the Marine Corps. George was a big guy. He was a loud guy. He used to call out cadence when we were lifting. It was fun, man. He made it a blast. And I remember one summer I went back and started lifting with him again. And he just kind of eyeballed me because I caught him on one of the lifts. I want to say we were deadlifting in like the grass off to the side. and he just kind of eyeballed me and he nodded his head and he goes, "You're getting stronger, Joel. You're getting bigger. But you never be a full-grown gorilla, but you can be a baby silverback." And I was probably, 6 or 7 fights into my MMA career. And I was telling the guys that story, and they're like, "Holy shit, that's right there. That's your new nickname because you fight like a fucking gorilla anyway." and then after that, it stuck. I gave myself from July 8th when I had my surgery to up until this near coming end of the year to get my shoulder right. I didn't want to try to press the gas pedal too much. I just wanted to get into the motion of things and get back on the mat, get my strength back up, and then after New Year's, be able to turn it back up. Goals is to be able to start training consistently again, really start ramping up my strength training, and probably look for Atlanta is going to be too soon. There's this February 1st. I just saw them post about it. Maybe like what we call the super fight. It'll be like an event, and they just have a bunch of premier matches. You do one match. It's not like a tournament. You go out and do one match, and then that's it. And it's a showcase show. So maybe a super fight in like late March or April, and maybe a tournament sometime in there too. But I want to get back. Really, right now, man, spending some time with my family has taken precedence. We needed some of the time to make some new connections as well as reconnect, and that's vital now to my well-being. And I believe it will be ultimately help me and be more powerful and be more passionate about being out on the mat, about completing my life in a different way. But yeah, man, next year, just getting out, man. Keep taking care of the people who take care of me, and doing the right by the people who have been there, the ones who I've had conversations with, the ones who have supported me, the ones that still send me messages. Man, we talked about the testimonial. Man, I still get a random message from that, and that was back in late May. Someone will reshare it, or they'll tell me that they watched it again, and I tell them how much it moved me. So, staying at that kind of role model. I never figured myself as a role model. I always just thought, just by leading by example would be the right thing to do, and not be so vocal about it. But I've just started doing. I spoke a couple of times in Indiana. I want to start doing some more outreach programs to guys who are locked up in the different facilities. There's a boys' home north of where I'm at right now. I like to get in there and talk to the kids, and let them know that man, no matter where they're at right now, it's not the end, man. That you are in an amazing opportunity to grow. And we talk about bad times, and that's the best time for growth, is when you're down here, because when you're down here, there's nowhere else to go but up. So where you're right here, you have everything in front of you to look forward to, because you're at the worst right now, or what you feel is at the worst right now, and you can do anything you want to do, and you can be anything you want to be. You just have to put yourself into the work, and don't ever separate yourself from the work. Don't ever say, I'm going to be successful. You already are fucking successful, because first of all, you're still alive, and you're still making it right now. All you have to do is put in the work. You're already successful. So emulate the work if you really want to be a part of that, because it's already there in you. You just have to bring them out of them. And that's what I want to give back to a lot of people, man, because I did it. I went to segregation when I was in prison. So I was in jail in prison. So there's there's not a lot of lower than that, So, and there was nowhere else but up. And after I got home, and then I was wrestling, then MMA, and then as things start happening, man, it was just about continually putting in the work to make sure I got results. And then the results just came. I don't think I'm anything special, and I never wanted to be a role model, but I wanted to be the hero in my story, like Joe Rogan said. I wanted to be the hero in my movie, because I heard him say that. You got to be your own hero first and take care of yourself. Because if I'm not showing up at my best, man, I can't give my best. So I have to be on top of stuff, and keep that mindset and of daily of, man, I'm going to be my fucking hero today. And no matter what it is, I'm going to make it fucking cool.
Fuck yeah. Yeah, man, I think you've got a great message and a great story. And, I'm just grateful to you know, I know we haven't had the chance to meet in person, but finally getting to talk to you on
Not
here
yet.
and just
Not yet.
continuing continuing our friendship, you know, and being able to sort of share your story with a lot of people who I think are having a really hard time. And, you know, you're a testament to all those dudes who think that they fucked up and that there's no way out. But really what you're saying is that there's no way but up, and you're kind of proof of that. So thanks for coming on the podcast, brother. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was a great talking to you, man.
Thank you. Absolutely, man. Appreciate it. My honor.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Barbaric Wisdom. I'm Bronson Lee Norton. If you've been enjoying the podcast so far, be sure to subscribe to stay updated on the latest episodes. If you would like to show your support and help us continue to be able to bring your favorite guests onto the show, head on over to www.patreon.com/barbaricwisdom. That's www.patreon.com/barbaricwisdom.